Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Roar Lions Roar. This is your host tonight, Nick Pollock, and I am joined by the one, the only Matt Filipovitz, or if you're talking to Matt DeBear, Matt Filipovitis, Matt Filipodipidits, however you want to say it. Matt, how you doing?
Nick, I'm good. It's a hot day here in Chicago, and it's been a little bit chilly the past few days, so I'm excited for this, what I think might be the last hurrah of summer. Before we shift into fall mode, which means football season. So I'll take that as a win.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty hot day out here in Seattle too. I think we're supposed to get up to maybe 91 today. It's pretty hot for us.
Oh,
but
whoa!
Unlike Chicago, this is kind of like we're kind of reaching like the second stage of our summer. Like it'll still stay pretty warm into like October for us, more or less. And I say that with probably a lot of people sympathizing because I looked at our numbers. There's a shockingly large number of listeners in Seattle, which that's kind of cool. And they're not me because I was looking at those numbers on Apple Podcasts, which I don't use. So it's not me inflating the numbers. So that's pretty interesting. Especially because
I don't believe you. I think you have like 5 devices going you need to subscribe on.
It's especially interesting because I think I've only met like 2 people out here aside from the one alumni event that we went to out here that I think it was for the Citrus Bowl. But I haven't met many Penn State people out here, so this is interesting. First and foremost, off the top, make sure you're subscribed to Roar Lions Roar wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, any of those. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. It'd be much appreciated. If you want to leave a question with that 5-star review, we will happily answer it on the podcast at some point whenever we see it. But we are here today to talk about, this is a Penn State team that has a lot of, pretty loaded position groups. And we are kind of cheating here because we're talking about technically 2 position groups scrunched into one here. But this Penn State secondary is pretty ridiculous looking. And we're going to start. Yeah, we're going to start by talking about the cornerbacks, which might be, both the cornerbacks and the safety rooms look awesome. The cornerbacks look absolutely insane. Looking back at last year's production, we lose Tariq Castro-Fields. That's a bummer. He was a longtime starter. He was a great Nittany Lion, did a lot of great things. But the talent that is still remaining in this room is pretty. I mean, there's a reason that I believe it was on 3 ranked Penn State as I think I saw the 3rd best secondary in the country for this season, which
Phil Steele has in top 10 as well.
Yeah,
Phil Steele is really high on them in his preview mag.
I agree with it. So Matt, just kind of give me your, eagle eye view, 100-foot view, whatever you want to call it, view of the cornerback room going into this year.
It's weird that we're talking about Penn State football and the depth concerns are at linebacker and not at anywhere in the secondary. There's a lot of talent. I think in the cornerback room alone, there's 4 dudes, maybe even 5. Am I forgetting someone? I keep on worrying I'm going to forget someone. There might be 5 dudes who can play, and 4 of them are probably draftable prospects or at least on a career trajectory towards it. It all starts with Joey Porter Jr., man. That dude is 4th year in the program, has played a lot of football, still has some work to do cleaning up some penalties, but I think he got all those out of him, hopefully, early on in his career, and I hope that he can become the highest drafted secondary player in Penn State history, and I think that's an attainable goal. Opposite of him starting, it's a battle right now between Johnny Dixon, the South Carolina transfer, and Kalen King, a talented true sophomore. And then you factor in Daquan Hardy, a guy, Nick, I know that's kind of what Hakeem Beeman is to me, is what Daquan Hardy is to you, I think is fair to say.
Yeah,
and then Marquis Wilson, who is finally back at corner, and I hope has settled down now as he looks to wind out his Nittany Lion career. So 5 dudes right there, not even to mention a talented true freshman class that came in. So it's hard to find a lot of holes to pick in this Penn State cornerback room. So major credit to Terry Smith, man. What a room he has built.
It's almost kind of cruel in a way because, I've been I've been waiting for Penn State to build a cornerback room like this since I started as a student in 2010. But especially with the Brent Pry defense, like my thing has always been like, if Brent Pry got his hands on just one, truly shut down cornerback, his defenses would just ascend into a completely new plane. That would have been just an absolute game breaker because We know he liked to play bend don't break. When you have a shutdown corner like that, it allows you to still play that way, but then also get really creative with the ways you bring pressure. So it's kind of sad in a way that he's not the one leading this defense with this elite cornerback room. But you said it. This is just an unbelievably talented group of dudes. Joey Porter Jr. back as a returning starter. And it's crazy. Kaelin King last year at times looked like he might be the best corner on the team. And now, all of a sudden, to no fault of his own, he might be the third best corner on the team. Like the reports of Johnny Dixon coming out of camp have just been unbelievably glowing from coaches and analysts alike. Like I believe you saw on Twitter, Audrey Snyder said he's one of the turnover kings of camp so far.
Yep. Yeah. Audrey Snyder tweeted that out tonight after James Franklin's during his media availability. Yeah.
That considering he kind of showed flashes last season, but he looked to be, not particularly close to necessarily stealing a starting job away, but I guess it's not all that uncommon for a guy that's a transfer, maybe takes just a beat longer to get acclimated to the new system. But if we're talking about Kaelin King as suddenly not a starter, that's a pretty fantastic place for this room to be. So the obvious question, I guess, is, and I think I know the obvious answer, but is this the best cornerback room that we've seen under James Franklin?
I think it has to be. The one that would compare is that the 2016 room or 2017 room? Yeah, 17 would have still had Grant Haley, Christian Campbell, and Amani Oruwariye. And John Reed would have been in there too. So right there, that's three corners who got drafted. Christian Campbell technically got drafted. No way around it. And Haley's latched on and had a pretty decent NFL career so far. Dude's got a Super Bowl ring. So for Penn State to have a room right now that could probably match that number of players drafted, or at least players with professional careers, is almost unheard of, considering the fact that I remember we were talking about that Penn State cornerback room as one of the best of all time. And now it gets, probably knocked down a peg after like less than one recruiting cycle. So just shout out to Terry Smith, man. He's just built that room up. And I don't see a way for this room to not be top two in the Big Ten, maybe number one.
Yeah. And I think the difference, I'm glad you called it that 2016 group. I'm not sure if Christian Campbell might have been gone.
It was 17. I'm thinking of.
Okay. Regardless.
Because Campbell and Haley came in the same year because they played and Oruwariye redshirted. And then Oruwariye would have ended up being the best one of all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was going to say, but I think the main difference between this group and that group is of that group, of those guys that did go to the NFL, Oruwariye was really the only one that was drafted to continue being a standout corner in the NFL, I think is fair to say. I think Haley and Campbell were both drafted more as maybe they can be depth on the cornerback chart, but mainly contribute on special teams. All the dudes we're talking about in the cornerback room right now, I think are looking like future NFL cornerbacks, not just maybe they'll figure it out and they can ball out on special teams in the meantime. These look like legitimate NFL guys on the defense, which is really, really cool and something that is just an absolute game changer. And I think it's partially why I'm not as worried about the linebackers as I think I may have been, because I know that what's behind them is looking truly, truly elite.
Yeah. I think that's totally fair. I think we're going to see a lot of 5 DB sets, and that third corner is going to be a slog between whoever loses that Kalen King, Johnny Dixon battle, and then Daquan Hardy, Marquis Wilson, and then the 5-4 safeties that we think can actually play. It's an embarrassment of riches, and I cannot believe we're talking about a Penn State football team and a Penn State football secondary in this context. I never would have imagined this was possible, even 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And like you said, huge testament to the work of Terry Smith. I think at this point he's probably been at Penn State longer than most of us would have anticipated him being.
He's the last of the original Franklin staff still
there. Yeah. And we know he was at least scheduled to interview for the Temple job last year. I don't remember if that interview actually happened or not.
Yeah.
But he's someone who I think probably has had at least a couple opportunities to go be a defensive coordinator somewhere. And he's
You'd be crazy not to interview him. Yeah.
But he's chosen to stay at Penn State and continue building this room. And it's taken a long time, but like this is what it takes to build a room like this. Like it takes year over year over year over year of just getting a little bit better with your recruiting efforts at the position each time, because every time you recruit someone a little bit better, they perform a little bit better on the field, and you bring in a slightly better recruit after that. And I think, Kaelin King is probably the kind of the cherry on top at this point as far as cornerback recruits. So it's an exciting room for sure. I'm curious, let's say first snap of the season on defense. Who do you think, assuming it's not a nickel set, which, it very well could be, knowing Purdue,
I think it will be for
Purdue. Yeah. But let's say it's the first snap is just a typical 2-corner set. Who do you think are going to be the 2 guys out there?
It's got to be Porter Jr. That's a lock. And then just from everything we're hearing coming out of camp, I think I got to give it to Johnny Dixon. I think if, the dude's co-takeaway king right now with a talented underclassman we'll talk about in the safety room here in a little bit. But I don't know how you keep that guy off the field, especially, with Manny Diaz now at the helm, a dude who loves takeaways. So right now, I think it has to be Joey Porter Jr. and Johnny Dixon. And that's no slight to Kalen King or Marquis Wilson or Daquan Hardy, because I think those guys are still going to be on the field a ton. It's just, listen, there's only so many spots. There's only so many dudes who can be on the field at one time. And I think those two kind of have to be the ones right now if what we're hearing is indeed what things are trending towards. Yeah,
I agree with all that. It's kind of funny. I feel like the guy I actually have out of that top 3, I think the guy I'm actually maybe the most unsure about in a weird way might be Porter, just because
for me it is.
Yeah, I mean, just because we know he has the physical talent and we know he has the shutdown ability, but we need to see that he's kind of put the penalties behind him. We need to see that he's learned how to play physical without drawing flags. And I mean,
he plays like a 6'3" safety. He hasn't figured out how to play like a 6'3" corner yet. And that's something he has to get down. Yeah,
totally. And, obviously I think we both agree he has the highest ceiling of the 3. Although, I mean, maybe King's up. I mean, similar, but with his size, you kind of have to give it to Porter. But yeah, it's just such a fun spot that Penn State's in. Like we legitimately have not seen a room that looks like this for the cornerbacks in a really, really long time. And it's going to be just exhilarating. Yeah. I can't wait.
I'm excited about it. Should be so fascinating to watch. I love that they have this kind of depth.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, Matt, has your home field order shipped yet?
No, but real quick, I'm very proud of you. I thought you were going to mention Richard Sherman or Brandon Browner at least once during that. I'm really proud of you that you didn't. I would have bet money that you would have mentioned one of them. So I'm very proud of you. But no, my home field order is yet to ship. I have checked religiously whenever I hear my doorbell ring or knock at my door, and still nothing yet. But it's coming. I know it's coming soon.
I was really, really close to comparing Joey Porter Jr. to Brandon Browner. I
thought you were about to.
I really
thought you were about to.
I mean, it's hard not, like, it is, building the Legion of Boom is the ideal secondary. Like, having an Earl Thomas type to fly around, a Cam Chancellor type in the box to kill people. Richard Sherman is gonna lock down everyone, and then Brandon Browner is just gonna kill you on the other side. Like, it's perfect. It's fine. So my home field order hasn't shipped yet either, but I'm really excited for it to get here because, as we've talked about before, these home field shirts just look absolutely incredible with their new Penn State drop this past weekend. The designs are outstanding. And we've talked before about just the special care that they put into finding these truly, like, you will not see these designs anywhere else. We said, obviously Penn State's not going to release things like that themselves, but these are things that like when we made shirts, like, we would never think to do some of these things. Like, takes much more creative minds than ours, and much more, minds dedicated to creating truly special shirts than ours. Like, we just tried to make stuff that was like kind of funny, or stuff that we thought was like, would resonate a bit, I guess. But it's been really fascinating as we've joined in this partnership with Home Field Apparel to learn more about their process. And I know it's given me a greater appreciation for what a good clothing company can be. They're not just taking logos and putting them on 100% cotton t-shirts. That's not the deal. They're making high quality shirts with high quality designs that will make you, proud to wear and represent this stuff for your school. And the whole big new release and competition part of it is a really cool aspect that I don't feel like we've talked about enough. Like, this is what a 2022 company should look like. Like, everybody wants to show school pride, and they want to find ways to be able to show that pride, and proving that you like your merchandise for your school more than other people like theirs is a perfect way to do it in the world of capitalism in 2022. So really exciting that Penn State is now that new record holder. Ohio State, sorry, you're not going to top it as much as you might think you will.
No chance.
But on the off chance that you have not ordered your Penn State home field apparel already, great news, because you can go on and order for the first time on the website and use the code ROARLIONSROAR, all caps, all one word, and you can get 15% off your first order, which, if you order, Matt?
Whichever way that is, 15, 1-5, whichever way that is.
For those of you who are listening, not watching, Matt is attempting to show 1-5 on his fingers, but we don't actually know which direction we end up looking like in the end, so tough to say.
No chance.
But like I was saying, if you can use that code ROARLIONSROAR for 15% off your order, and if you order as many shirts as I know I did, and I'm sure Matt did, that 15% is a pretty big deal. Like, for me, I think it was $40 off, which you can use math and figure out how much I spent otherwise, but just a really awesome company, a really awesome partnership. Really happy to be working with them, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with them for a long time. And hopefully, before too long, they'll actually introduce more Penn State designs. I know one thing that we as a Roar Lions or entity are looking for is maybe a basketball shirt. That'd be a lot of fun. So once again,
would be cool.
For 15% off from your first order from Home Field, use the code ROARLIONSROAR at checkout. And now, let's go talk about the other part of the secondary for Penn State, and that is the safety room, which may not have as much top-end talent as the cornerback room, but honestly somehow might be even deeper. What are your general thoughts of this room, Matt? Hot take? I don't know.
I think that's a hot take. It's because you're losing the best player in your secondary from that unit last year. Which is and he's now playing for my beloved Chicago Bears, and he had a great preseason game this week, and the Bears won a 3-and-out all by himself. That's probably the only good thing the Chicago Bears will do this year. Go Bears! But this safety room is really interesting. You got Jair Brownback, who tied for the nation lead in interceptions with 6 of them, which is a crazy high number. And I'll be honest, a lot of them were pretty opportune in the sense that the Arkansas quarterback, who had no business throwing, just decided to throw it right to him for some reason. And then one came on a really good play by TCF that he just kind of like volleyball spiked at Brown, and he kind of caught it. Not taking anything away from him, but like he's not like the 50-50 jump ball kind of guy. He's just really good at being in the right place at the right time, which is a great skill to have as a safety. And I think an all Big Ten candidate heading into the season. And then opposite of him, it's an interesting battle between Keaton Ellis, a guy who played a ton as a corner as a true freshman, and then I think missed extended action both in 20 and 21 for whatever reason. I think it's multiple reasons at this point, whether that be injury or whatever else it was. It's just he never seemed to be able to put it all together. And for a guy who's in his 4th year with the program, I know he has the COVID year. I'd love to see him put it all together. And then there's Jalen Reed, a guy who got his red shirt burned. He took the Jahan Dotson approach to burning a red shirt in that he proved it on Saturdays that he deserved to be on the field. And then there's the guy who I think probably has the highest ceiling of anybody in that safety room in Zakee Wheatley. Converted corner, was the Springs takeaway king, and now, according to what we heard tonight, is tied with Johnny Dixon for the fall camp takeaway king. And any time you can get a guy who can get his hands on the football on the field, you take advantage of it. So maybe I'm forgetting someone, but those 4 dudes right there are all guys I would feel comfortable trotting out there with the ones tomorrow. And I don't think that's really been the case, considering for a long time Penn State's safety room was like a converted wide receiver, who went on to be a corner in the NFL, and Troy Apke. And then it felt like a lot of just like stopgap guys who were just filling in for a year. And now they finally built that depth up there too. So again, a lot of credit to the coaches there. And that goes to Tim Banks, now at Tennessee, and Anthony Poindexter for developing those guys and bringing those guys in. So it's a really interesting room, and I'm excited to watch that shakeout too.
Yeah, obviously, Ji'Ayir Brown is the star here. You mentioned a lot of his interceptions were, kind of right place, right time. And speaking of the play where Tariq Castro-Field tipped it up to him, that reminds me a lot of the time where Richard Sherman tipped him. No, I won't do that.
Oh, stop it.
But, it's kind of the way that he was kind of always in the right place at the right time reminded me a lot of like 2020 Ellis Brooks. Like
my guy.
He never
love Ellis Brooks.
It wasn't that he made the plays that caused the turnovers. It was just like the turnovers would happen, and then Ellis Brooks would just be there, be like, "Oh yeah, I'll take that ball. Yeah, sure."
Yeah, he found the plays more than he made the plays, which is still a hard thing to do.
Right. So it's similar, but I also think Ji'Ayir Brown is a better safety than Ellis Brooks was linebacker. And that's not a knock on Brooks as a linebacker. I just think Ji'Ayir Brown has the potential to be a really, really good safety. I think it was a great decision by him to come back. And I say that obviously kind of selfishly because I like watching him play football, but I also think that another year could do him a really good, could be really good for his draft stock, especially if Jaquan Brisker also balls out this year, because, people are going to say like, oh, well, that worked out for him, so it's going to work out for Brown too, even though they're different players. The thing that's most interesting to me here, and obviously Wheatley is fascinating to me. He's still pretty small, if I remember correctly, which, lends me a little bit of pause. It's not quite as big of a deal for a safety, but
he's listed at 189, which is the lightest of this group of the four safeties we discussed by just 4 pounds from Keaton Ellis.
Yeah, so if Jair Brown was kind of more of an enforcer type safety with more box ability, then I would probably feel a little bit more comfortable with Wheatley being the guy next to him. But I think Brown is better suited to be more of a center field type. Now, he did spend a good amount of time coming down and bodying up on the tight end. So I'm not saying he can't do that. But it seems to be that he is a bit better as that true center field type role. So I wonder if he and Wheatley are necessarily the best combination together. The name that I think is actually the most exciting to me of the backups is Jaylen Reed, because we saw him do some really awesome things last year. But the problem is that I think he is still Ji'Ayir Brown's primary backup. So we're probably not going to see the two of them on the field all that often. From the sound of it, it sounds like Keaton Ellis is still the leader in the clubhouse to be starting next to Ji'Ayir Brown, which, keeps the famous Penn State. Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see.
I don't know. I think Wheatley's pushing him hard.
It would keep the evergreen Penn State tradition of the converted corner being the starting safety alive, just as they did with Adrian Amos and Jordan Lucas and several
That's
others.
Wheatley too, though. So
no
matter
it is
what,
Wheatley
it's
too.
safe.
You're right. Okay. The other two names I think that are worth mentioning here are two of the freshmen, Makai Flowers and KJ Winston. Those are two names that have been generating a good amount of buzz. I know they asked Ji'Ayir Brown himself. He said that, he was really impressed with what he's seen from those two. And not that that's not the kind of quote you always hear. But it seems like the buzz they're getting is just a little bit more than we would typically hear about guys in that same situation. But to turn things back over to Ji'Ayir Brown, a very different player than Jaquan Brisker, but I'm curious if you think he can be as impactful just in a different role.
So when you sent me this question an hour ago, I actually really sat and thought about this, and I thought, what does it mean to be impactful when you're changing defensive schemes? Because Brisker made a big impact in the sense that he didn't get his hand on a ton of turnovers. He still made really big plays. And again, it's relative because if you're compared to Ji'Ayir Brown, the dude led the country in picks. That's unfair.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a different impact than Brisker did. In terms of if it's going to be bigger, I'm going to have to say no, because I think in the Manny Diaz defense, a bunch of dudes are going to make big impact splash plays that when we think about the kind of impact a player has, we're going to think about a variety of guys making those plays, as opposed to last year, it was more focused on Brisker and Brown. I think the corners are going to get their hands on a lot more footballs. I think the linebackers are going to get their hands on the footballs. I think we're going to see a lot more sacks and strip sacks and fumbles behind the line of scrimmage because of the aggressive style of play. So, like, it's kind of a yes and no answer. It's a major cop-out, but I don't think we're going to look back and see as many highlight reel plays from Brown as we did Brisker. That doesn't mean he's not going to have as big of an impact. I think that just means that a bunch of other dudes are going to be out there making those impact plays. Does that make sense? Did that track?
Yeah, it makes, and I agree with it. After I wrote this question and then I thought about it as well, I came up with a pretty similar point, actually. It kind of felt at times like last year that if Brisker wasn't at his best, the defense wasn't at its best. Like, if he wasn't firing on all cylinders, something just felt off and the whole defense struggled as a result. I feel like with this defense, Ji'Ayir Brown can not be like the true game breaker we know he can be, and this defense can still be really good. Just the sum of the parts seems a lot stronger going into this season than it did last year. And that's, obviously that's not to say that Ji'Ayir Brown can't, maybe he goes out there and picks off 8 passes this year. Like, well, what defines?
Could you imagine?
What defines?
How many turnovers does everyone else have? Oh my God!
Yeah,
that's like 30 turnover season.
I wonder when the last time we saw a season like that for Penn State was. I mean, because it's like the 16 and 17 defenses were good, but they weren't turning teams over like that. That's not why they were good. That's a little homework assignment. See when the last time they were that impactful in the turnover column. But overall, I agree. I think that, and I think their style of play actually will make it difficult for Brown to be as impactful as Brisker, just because Brisker was everywhere. Like he did everything for that defense. So I think Ji'Ayir Brown could be a really good player, but in a different way, and maybe not in a way that's just quite as impactful to the overall defense. Who should be next to him, though? It sounds like you're leaning Wheatley.
So this is actually, it sounds like I am, leaning Wheatley, and I may have talked myself into it on this very podcast, live in real time, or on demand. That's the fun of the medium. But I still think it has to be Ellis, just because of who's playing in front of them. This is still a very young linebacker unit. It's still very inexperienced. It's still going to feature heavily a 6th-year converted safety playing linebacker for 8.5 months. So in that case, I'd rather have the steady, reliable, knows the defense really well. Not that Wheatley doesn't, but you learn a lot through game experience. You learn a lot through those reps. And that doesn't mean I don't think Wheatley can take this job by, say, October, but at least to start, just to cover up some mistakes that can happen from a young defense that's shifting to a more aggressive scheme. I think Keaton Ellis is the better option to have out there, at least to start. And then if Wheatley proves it, which it seems like he's doing constantly, that he should be that other starting guy, more power to him. That's really impressive to earn that role as a redshirt freshman. And that just proves that was a phenomenal decision by the coaching staff to move him back to safety. But just in terms of, let's limit the big plays, the big plays we allow, and let's play conservative with at least one of our guys in the secondary, because I think the other 3 are going to just thrive to be ball hawks, or other 4 if it's a nickel set, which we'll see a lot of. So in that case, I think Ellis is the best option to start the year. But again, that could change by, even Northwestern already.
Yeah, I agree with all that. We see it all the time. There's that guy that's been in the program 4 years, 5 years, 6 years that has always just been kind of whatever. And then that last year they just explode onto the scene. And it's just they're college kids, right? Like they are still growing, they are still learning. And Keaton Ellis seems like the perfect kind of guy to be that next, like, whoa, you got a lot better this summer out of nowhere type deal. And I agree with your rationale behind it too. as you were talking, it made me think, what if on like 3rd and longs, they just go into like pure chaos defense? Wheatley comes in next to Brown. They both are just doing nothing but staring at the quarterback's eyes and trying to just grab picks. That'd be super fun.
I think you can do that. I think with the kind of front they'll be able to run, thanks to Hakeem Beeman, I think you can get away with that. Honest to God, I think we're going to see so many 5 defensive back sets, and I think we'll even see a good amount of 6 defensive back sets. Again, which is nuts that we're talking about Penn State football, and the conversation is get the linebackers off the field and put on the corners and the safeties.
For those of you that had Matt mention Hakeem Beeman on your bingo cards, you're welcome. I think the final thing I want to talk about before we get out of here, hit the mic. The final thing I want to talk about before we get out of here, and we mentioned his name a couple times, Daquan Hardy. So Daquan Hardy was probably my favorite recruit in that class, just because I am always a huge fan of taking the Pennsylvania kid that is not highly rated, but just does ridiculous things against the competition he faces. You know, the last one, the best example before Daquan Hardy is Ji'Ayir Brown, and that worked out pretty well too. But Daquan Hardy last year played purely as a nickel cornerback and was just phenomenal. Like, just absolutely outstanding. I know that was one of the big issues on the 2020 defense, and that role typically ended up going to Lamont Wade. And with the Maryland game as the best example, that was a struggle, as Rakeem Jarrett ran the same little slant pattern over the middle for 2 straight touchdowns, looked identical. That is the exact kind of play that Daquan Hardy just erased last year. Like, it was just non-existent. And we heard in the spring that the decision had been made to move Daquan Hardy to safety. Now, we haven't really heard a whole lot about that move since then.
I don't know if it's a move. I think it was cross-trained because he's still listed as a corner on the roster.
That would make sense to me, yeah, because it wouldn't be the first time, because, you know, back when Lamont Wade was still a freshman and he was purely a slot corner, he actually played really well in that role. And then they moved him to safety full-time, and he kind of learned that. And when he came back and played the star and tried to play that slot corner role again, it didn't quite go as well. So there was a little twinge of worry for me when I heard that Hardy was moving to safety, because to me, it didn't make sense why you would move him out of that role that he so excelled in. But do you assume that he's going to be in that same position this fall?
I think the position changes now under Diaz. Like, I think the way they handle that is going to be different. Like, I think the line for a guy like that between safety and corner kind of changes. It's like how basketball is becoming more positionless. I think the Penn State secondary for certain guys is becoming positionless. So I think he's still going to be that slot corner. And I want to make sure I call it a stat that came from our buddy Bill Connolly over at ESPN. Hardy averaged a havoc play every 24 snaps. And for a dude that's an unreal amount for a dude who's not on the field, like for every single snap. Like, that's a crazy high amount. So that guy's got to be on the field, no way around it. And I think Diaz can use him in a very unique way. But in terms of, like, what you want to refer to him as, like, position-wise, I mean, he's listed as a corner, but he really is like a true hybrid. And I don't think we've ever seen a Penn State team have a guy like that is, like, not like the star, because the star was like glorified corner. Like, let's be honest. I think this is like such a unique space to exist in. And I think it's tailor-made to a guy built like Daquan Hardy.
Yeah, it was, at most of the beginning of last year, he was pretty much primarily just in that slot corner role and matched up against the slot receiver. But as the year went on, we saw him start to blitz more, and he was a force behind the line of scrimmage.
He thrived in that role.
Yeah, he made tackles for loss. He got sacks. So I'm glad that the stats ended up reflecting that. And I really like the point that you made before we started the podcast. You were talking about, like, Manny Diaz, they can legitimately, like, hide him on the defense and just make him appear. Like, he's not a big dude. Like, you can do some really fun things with him.
Daquan, go stand behind Joey Porter, and when the snap goes, just pop out of nowhere. Like, read where the quarterback's going. Like, that you could do that.
I love it. All right, Matt, any final thoughts on either the cornerbacks or the safeties? Just, again, such an awesome group.
Unreal how talented this group is. I think they're going to have a really fun challenging. It's Aiden O'Connell and Jeff Brom in that Purdue offense to start the year. And I think they're going to be up to the challenge. Like, there's no one in that room who we discussed who's a question mark to me. So just, again, outstanding job by those recruiting staffs and by those position coaches to develop some great players. And now it's up to Manny Diaz to really have some fun. And I don't know if there's a turnover chain. I really hope there is. Like, I really hope there's like something cool. Because I think a lot of those dudes.
I wrote about this several years ago. I listed a lot of great potential ideas for turnover.
The one I remember was the turnover sticky bun, which I think would actually be pretty funny.
Are you forgetting the turnover Real Pen Live comment? Because that was the piece de resistance in the piece.
Did you say turnover Old Coley, or did I make that joke back then? I think that was mine. They bring Old Coley and you get a turnover. You get to sit on top of it and pretend to ride it. Just giving out free ideas at this point to the Penn State staff. It's going to be fun, man. I think a lot of dudes are going to make some really big plays, and that makes it fun. And that also builds just phenomenal depth and really prepares you for the rigors of a Big Ten season. So extremely excited to watch this group.
Yeah, I think this time next year, it's not at all out of the question that we're talking about how Penn State could be replacing, 2 or 3 top 2 or 3 round NFL draft picks. Like, that's totally on the table with this group. There's so much talent, and they absolutely have that ceiling.
It's also awesome because 3 of the guys we mentioned aren't even draft eligible. Like Kalen King, Zaquee Wheatley, and Jaylen Reed are all not draft eligible yet. So, like, it's the great balance between like experience and this young influx of talent, man. It's great. I'm sorry. I'll let you do the sign off now. I know we're going long, but there's just so much to talk about with this room, man. It's crazy.
They're in such a great spot. In retrospect, maybe we shouldn't have combined these 2 into one, because we could probably go for 30 minutes about each one. But with that, that brings us to the end of our defensive position preview. So thanks for following along. We still have the special teams to go, and that will be coming tomorrow. But I think it's safe to say, while we certainly have questions about the Penn State defense and the team in general, this looks like a pretty darn good football team, all things considered.
Yeah, especially this defense, man. This is gonna be next level fun. I'm excited to watch Diaz get in the lab and go to work.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, if you have the chance to do so and you're not already, please subscribe to Roar Lions Roar on whatever podcast platform you choose. And if you have the moment to do so, please go ahead and visit us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a 5-star review. Leave a question if you got one, or just leave a comment. Say hi. We read them. We'll see it. That'd be great. For myself, Nick Polak. Oh, and make sure you go on Home Field Apparel. Use that 15% off code Roar Lions Roar, all caps, all one word, for your first order only. For myself, Nick Polak, for my co-host, Matt Filipovitz, thanks for listening. Go State.
Go State.